Hi there! One of the community members asked for a polygon analysis, so let's add it in. Quickly, we'll look at the weekly chart as well as the daily. But before that, because I'm adding this new, I want to talk about one thing very important first. Here, when we look at the chart, this weekly time frame, we notice one thing quickly, right? Since the 21 peak, we have gone down to the 23 and eventually 24, and now actually 2 in 2024. That's a tricky one. The key part is, or the key message is, it's getting lower and lower for the peaks, and now it seems like it's gathering some momentum, but before that it showed us like a very deep price retracement. I've seen this in another one, if you remember, or if you've followed my other sessions. If I remember correctly, it's polka dot. So if you look at the polka dot chart, you see it has dropped outside of this white box. It's only at the start, at the launch of the coin, it showed as low as that. The better or positive side of it is, if we look at these peaks, polka dot was weaker, at least for Polygon. The peaks seems to be not getting so low so quickly. It's a gradual decline, but still we have to pay attention to this, because for crypto projects, we have to be mindful of one thing. I'll use the term DPS. Yes, we're not talking about esports or gaming, but I guess people will remember this easily. DPS, I'm going to show you what that is. So, D, that's going too wide. Let me get to this point. D means demand. And then P is the popularity. Sorry about the writing, because I couldn't find my USB cable for my writing pad over here. So I have to use my mouse for the time being. I'll go search for it, so it'll be easier. And S, finally, support. So why did I mention this DPS? Because it's the fundamental fuel for whether a coin or a project can go to the moon. So those three items, demand itself, easily understandable. If there are people using it, there are many projects going on within that ecosystem. That's demand. And then popularity is a different thing, because there can be no actual usage whatsoever, but people just like it. Let's put it this way: people are just crazy about it. They want to hold it for whatever reason. They like the name or whatever concept that's been sold. That's popularity. Finally, support. Support is more like it's different from the fan or sentimental thing that I just mentioned in popularity. It's more the let me give an example. Like, if there's a whale willing to pump in funding to support the project, that's support. If there are developers trying to keep the project going, like many open source projects, that's also a kind of support. So these three things, if a project have all these, that's totally great. You can see a brighter future for that. But if it lose one or even two of it, then it's probably why we see that kind of decline in the chart itself. So a very long story to start with, but because I've just started to cover Polygon, I want to give this as a big caveat that if you want to get into Polygon, better check whether the project is still getting a lot of traction, a lot of support, demand, and like DPS, remember that. So, weekly chart, it seems like it's in an accumulation cycle. The preliminary support was back in February this year, and then we saw the buying climax at late March. Eventually, an automatic rally early May, and then came back to a second test during mid-June. Now it seems it's showing some sign of strength. The volume bars themselves are higher than the previous 2 months, so that's a positive sign. All we are hoping to see is the completion of the sign of strength and whether there is some form of horizontal action like what we've seen in September last year. There may be deeper retracements, but as of this moment, outside of the white box, the only support that we can find would be the selling climax. So that's around 16 cents roughly. And the interesting part is because selling climax, if you have been following my sessions, may not be the lowest point during an accumulation cycle. You see this test over the 2 accumulation cycles were much deeper than the selling climax themselves. So whether or not it will go below that 16 cents line, I'll say there's a possibility, but not very likely, I hope, unless the project is really dying. Going back to the long story in the beginning of the video. So this is the big picture. We hope the retracement wouldn't get too deep and then eventually show us a buying climax, much like December last year. If that's the case, good news for whoever is looking for a price climb. And if we look at the daily charts, I have to shrink this a little but expand the vertical a little so you can still see it on a mobile phone. Here, the activities obviously has grown over the past 10-14 days since the July 8th. So that's a good sign because it's getting attention. The interesting part here is, I have to expand this or zoom in really large for this one. I can use the auto. So here is the line here I am trying to draw your attention to. So someone might have put in the wrong order, or people FOMO in too quickly and it hits the like the selling orders of quite a number of people, because the white resistance line is right there, so does the yellow. So there could be a lot of orders over there, the sell orders. That's why it's plummeting quickly back to where it is. Well, the good thing is the upward trend, assuming this is the one for now, because it can change. Let's say if this is the upward trend, that line over there went way outside of the upward trend, and that's why it's got pulled back to the box. So it's like people saying, don't go too crazy yet, we have to maintain some sort of market order. So that's where it's coming back to. And now you can see immediately after I've drawn this upward trend box, the triangles that we always see, we're approaching it. By the end of this month, in a week's time, it's getting to this center point between the 2 edges. That's usually when a breakout happens. Sometimes it may be earlier, sometimes it may get closer to the tip, but it's not likely that it goes to the very tip. A lot of times it already made the move well before that. So either it has to break above this white line once again, besides what happened on the 8th, that's around 28 cents, or it has to come back down outside of this upward trend box. That's a moving support line somewhere from 24 cents all the way to 27 cents. So those are the two likely possibilities. But looking at the Wyckoff pattern, if this is really the spring and this is already the backup and last point of supply, one would expect a buying climax is near, right? So last time it happened back in, where's the BC? Okay, right here. It was December in 2024, and pulling this back. Okay, I have to use the auto again. So where is this going to land? That's our question, right? So here, I would say if what we talked about in the beginning, remember this lower and lower buying climax that we talked about, right? So at this time, even the weekly is going to show us a buying climax. That means both are climbing. So if this is going weekly, going to show a buying climax, as well as this one is going to show us a buying climax, then in the daily chart, this buying climax would be higher. But if this lower peak trend is going to continue, if it ends up at around 57-58 cents, then that's where the buying climax of the weekly, but the daily itself would be different. So let me put a mark here, so we know we put it somewhere around the 58 cents price. That's on the assumption of a lower and lower peak. So just a wild guess, this one. We'll keep it here anyway. Going back to the daily chart, because weekly happens in a much longer time frame, in the daily it can happen more frequently. The meaning of that is, after the buying climax, there can be an automatic reaction that retraces back to the yellow zone, or right above the yellow zone, the top edge of the yellow box, and then eventually there is an upthrust, and maybe even upthrust of the distribution. So for the weekly chart, it may be a little bit of retracement from the sign of strength and then go to the buying climax. But in the daily, it may be a series of movements before it gets to that buying climax in the weekly chart. So it can be a full distribution cycle with multiple stages in the daily chart already, while in the weekly chart it's only one, or the first stage of distribution. So that's the tricky point, going across two different timelines and looking at the Wyckoff pattern. So very long story for the first session of Polygon. I hope you like it, especially if you are the one that requested for the analysis. Polygon itself, I hope it continues to develop, but for a lot of layer 2 chains is a bit tricky, especially when the market, or the US, has signed all the bills to support the development of blockchain. Because public blockchain, while establishing a primary chain, a layer 1s, and getting sufficient traction is difficult, riding on an existing ecosystem like the Ethereum, or I don't know, the Binance, or some other layer 1s, it's easier for the layer 2s to get in and compete. So be careful or when you try to support a particular layer 2 project, or even layer 3, because the bar of entry may be lower than the layer 1s because of all these factors I talked about. So trade safe. If you find the project getting the DP as I mentioned in the beginning. That's perfectly, I would say, positive scenario. Hope